Welcome to this class on the astrological houses. I'm Cayelin Castell, and we're going to look at uh, starting to understand what the houses mean. We need all these different pieces to really be able to understand what's behind putting a chart together. So one of the next classes we'll be doing will be on the chart as a map and how to draw it up and what some of the different aspects, putting all these different pieces that we've been learning together. So the first thing I want to talk about is that the astrological houses, well, of course, we have a certain way of looking at it in shamanic astrology. I'm going to take you through each house and give you our view, the shamanic astrology view, and then we'll look at also the traditional view. Sometimes our view and the traditional view match up, and sometimes not. So, or sometimes there's some slight differences. Anyway, I would just want you to know what the traditional look is at the houses, and then also how to get a deeper understanding of what they mean for from this perspective. And you know, our intention always is to simplify it and make it as easy as possible to understand. So the houses of the chart really are representative of a mapping system to kind of get a sense of where things are in the sky. And we'll go more deeply into this when we look at the chart as a map of the sky. And the houses are primarily designed as a way to look at where the planets are in the sky and then derive meaning from those relationships. So if say the sun is below the horizon or the moon is below the horizon, it's in one of the first 6 houses, which usually is below the horizon. Sometimes in the first house, things can be can just have risen above the horizon. But anyway, so that gives us a sense of meaning or understanding of influences that are also affecting that planet in addition to the sign that the planet is in and what other relationships may be going on with that particular planet. So house systems is really a complicated subject. There are at least 25 different house systems. I know that Solar Fire lists 25 different house systems and different ways of drawing up a chart and deriving meaning from the different ways. So some of them are based on creating a mathematical formula to divide up the space between what's rising over the eastern horizon and what's on the midheaven. Now, the midheaven is not the zenith. The midheaven is the highest point on the ecliptic, and the ecliptic is shifting sometimes closer to the what's rising or to the horizon, and sometimes further away, depending on what time of day it is. And so at some point there was a decision to create these different ways of dividing up the space between what's rising and what's on the midheaven. Now, the oldest house system known is the whole sign house system, and that's the house system we use. Back in 1999, there were a series of articles in the Mountain Astrologer written by Robert Hand, who had been doing research with Project Hindsight, and what they discovered is that the most ancient house system, the oldest records of a house system that we could find, looking from the astrological perspective, is the whole sign house system. And it is the simplest, it is the least complicated. So basically, it's a house system that puts 0 degrees of the rising sign, or whatever the sign is that's rising over the eastern horizon at the time of birth, on the chart. So say, for example, if you're Aries rising, you'd have 0 degrees Aries on the first house cusp. Now, perhaps maybe your rising sign is at 26 degrees. So you place the ascendant in the first house at 26 degrees, so it'd be towards the end of the house. Or say perhaps you have the ascendant at 2 degrees. Well, it'd be very close to that first house cusp. Or maybe it's at 15 degrees and then it's right in the center. It could be Scorpio, it could be Taurus, it could be any of the 12 signs, because over 24 hours, about every 2 hours, a new sign, a new seasonal sign is rising over the eastern horizon. And so the first house ascendant is representative of what is rising in the east. And the midheaven or the highest point on the ecliptic. It's also the MC of the chart. So AS is what's described as the ascendant, always in the first house. And the MC, one of the things was from the whole sign house system is that the MC can sometimes show up in the 10th house, which is the house cusp that is usually used in many house systems, or it could be in the 9th house or the 11th house, depending on the sign of the midheaven where the sign is. So sometimes, so for example, I'll give you an example, a personal example. I'm Scorpio rising. I have Leo on my midheaven, so it shows up in my 10th house because that is one of the signs of self-interest, and so there, it's pretty much a square. It's going to show up in the 10th house. My husband has Scorpio rising, but he has Virgo on the midheaven. So his midheaven shows up in the 11th house. Now, if he had, instead of having Leo, say he had Cancer on the midheaven, and that is possible, he would have then a 9th house midheaven. So sometimes the midheaven then shifts houses. But the thing that's really great about the whole sign house system is it gets rid of all the complications of the other house systems, like the different mathematical formulas, sometimes having really big houses, sometimes having really small houses. So that means then that planets are transiting. Sometimes you have planets of different signs in the same houses, but with the whole sign house system, we always have planets of the same sign in the same house. There's no question about which house it's in. Is it almost in this house, or is it, has it moved on to the next house? Because it could be so close on the border of a house cusp. And so it just simplifies everything tremendously. So we use the whole sign house system, and that is the reason, or the primary essence, and of over 15 years of working with the whole sign house system, we have found it to be very effective. It simplifies everything. It makes it easier. The other thing that other house systems can have is something called intercepted houses, meaning that the sign doesn't show up on a house cusp, so it winds up being inside a house. And so, for example, maybe the house cusp is Aquarius, but it in the middle of the house it turns into Pisces, and before it gets out of Pisces, it turns into Aries. So we have Aries on the next cusp. So Pisces doesn't show up as being on a cusp, and of course the opposite point, Virgo point, would be the same story. So it becomes very complicated, and there's whole interpretations that have been put around these different configurations and things that can happen with these different house systems. And you can run your chart on many different house systems and come up with planets being in different houses. So that becomes complicated as well. So we have found that it just really simplifies the whole process and makes it much easier, and so much easier to just get a sense of what's going on by using this house system, the whole sign house system, the oldest system actually, and it is the system that the Babylonians and Sumerians used and the Vedic astrologers adopted. So they actually use the whole sign house system. The other thing to think about is with whole signs, it implies a return to wholeness. I thought about this back in 1999 when we started working with the whole sign house system and giving a whole sign to a house. So great. Anyway, so there's an implication of a return to wholeness. All right, so we're going to go through each of the houses, and I'm going to go fairly quickly. You've got this on a handout, but I just want to sort of speak to each house. So the first house, and this is where the ascendant is found. But regardless of what your ascendant is, whether you have Scorpio rising or Cancer rising or Gemini rising, the energy of the first house is still Aries, and it has to do with self. And because the rising sign is the personal identity project for the life, the rising sign then represents what the exploration of self is. So say, for example, if you're Scorpio rising, then the exploration of self is through the Scorpio mysteries. And that is the primary mystery school of the current life, whatever is rising over the eastern horizon. Now, Aries is most resonant with Mars, the planet Mars, and Mars represents the sacred masculine. So if Mars happens to fall in the first house, that's its favorite place to be, in the first house. If Mars happens to be in Aries in the first house, that would be like super cool for Mars. Yeah, so I guess that's the main thing I wanted to say about that. Now, this is also the place, because of the energy being connected to Aries, the modality of the householder or culture bearer. And it has to do with, the issues of Aries, which also represent having a noble, worthy cause or mission that helps us to explore who we are and to know more about ourselves, what we are committed to, what are we willing to take action on. And it's in the element of fire. So each house has a connection to these different energies. There will be a sign that's connected to it, a planet that's connected to it, a modality that's connected to it, and an element that's connected to it. So we'll see more of that as we go along. Now, we would say in Shamanic Astrology, the first house really is the adventure of self-discovery and the primary mysteries of personal self. Traditionally, this has also been seen as the intended style of how you present yourself in the world, including your mannerisms, likes and dislikes, your disposition and temperament. Also might be seen as your outward behavior and how the world sees you. This is what more mundane or traditional astrology would say is representative of the first house. However, we've kind of simplified it in Shamanic Astrology. And also, it's like if you just think of it as your mannerisms and, your outward behavior and how the world sees you, you're really missing the deeper meaning and possibility of what the first house really represents, because it is the discovery of personal self. Traditionally, it also is seen as where we learn to see and know ourselves beyond what anyone else might think or project. Oh, that's not traditionally. That's more from the Shamanic Astrology perspective. So this is where we learn to see and know ourselves beyond what others might think or project onto us. So I actually should probably move this. I'm going to do that right now while we're doing this. Move this up to this part of the presentation. Okay, there we go. So that fixed that. All right, so now let's go to the second house. This has to do with Taurus, the sign of Taurus, and that is connected to receptivity and personal resources. Venus is the planet that most resonates with this part of the chart. So if you have Venus in the second house, it's a very happy place for Venus to be. She represents the sacred feminine. And this is also in the modality of self-interest and the element of earth. So from the Shamanic Astrology perspective, we say this is where we are intended to open to receive pleasure, beauty, and intimacy as art forms, and how to be embodied, how to really embody the experience of pleasure and beauty and intimacy. Now, traditionally, and this is where you can see a little bit of a difference, this is the house of money and possessions. So to experience pleasure, beauty, and intimacy, perhaps money and possessions are helpful, but it's not really the essence of the second house, because we can get stuck and hung up in our money and possessions, and they can, our possessions can possess us, and maybe we're not even really having the experience of beauty and pleasure and intimacy. So this refers to what is owned from a traditional perspective, what you own, what you desire, your income and financial prospects, and how you feel about money and possessions. So whatever planets may show up in this house can give you a deeper understanding of these things. But from a Shamanic Astrology perspective, we could say it's really about what we're learning how to be open to receive, and in terms of the realm of pleasure and beauty, etc. So if you have a lot of second house planets, there is a strong intention around that for you. Now, third house is the sign most resonant, and the energy most connected to the third house is Gemini, which has to do with communication, and we'll see how even traditional astrology looks at it that way. Mercury, which is the planet that most favorite place to be, is in the third house. The mind, having to do with the mind, and it's in the modality of in service to spirit and in the element of air. So, and of course, air is most connected to the realm of communication, and Gemini is about communication in service to spirit. So, Shamanic Astrology would say the adventure of creative communication or creative self-expression and the mysteries of the mind are associated with the third house. Traditionally, this would also be seen as how we network, exchange information, learn and express, not that different, and also traditionally associated with siblings and family ties and governing the way you think, speak, and write. So, so there's some similarities there and also some differences. We might not in shamanic astrology connect it to siblings so much, but maybe it's that is we wouldn't really say that in from a shamanic astrology perspective, but from from the more traditional or mundane perspective, they might give you information based on, what they see, what planets they see there as to what situation you might have had with siblings. The fourth house, Cancer, is the sign that most connects, is the sign that really is the underlying energy of this house that has to do with home and family. The moon is the planet. Its favorite place to be would be in the fourth house, and that's connected to the lineage that we bring in with us. And it's also a householder culture bearer modality and in the element of water. So this house is really describing home and roots, and that can include the past and the future as well as our present lineage. And also the intention about how it is we're meant to experience home and family in the current life. What is the archetypal energy around that? And so it describes the gifts and karmic patterns that you bring with you from the ancestral line. So for example, one of the ways that I tend to look at this is if you have Chiron in the fourth house, then there may be some wounding in the family lineage that you're here to help heal. Now, of course, not having Chiron in the fourth house doesn't mean there's not wounding in the family lineage, but it would mean that there is an intention on your part as someone who carries that. Or maybe Pluto could be a similar thing about creating the healing, doing the shamanic work around the wounding of the family lineage. So, so that's one way to look at that. We could say that it really describes the gifts and karmic patterns that you bring with you from the ancestral line, and it rules the current domestic affairs, the place we call home in the physical sense and emotional sense, and what we might protect and keep hidden. So because this is part of the chart that is not visible, it's under the horizon. So these are the things that we might not want other people to know. It's more personal. I often refer to it as how you live more privately within yourself, the fourth house, and we could say our private selves. And it's also the place where we establish the foundations that can nurture and support home, family, and community. And everybody's going to do it in a different way depending on what sign and planets are in the fourth house. So for example, if somebody has Aquarius in the fourth house, then perhaps they're going to do home and family in a completely revolutionary, new and unique way, marching to their own drumbeat, doing it in a way that is different than what other people would think of as traditional or more way of doing family. And also then depending on what planets are there, as I already mentioned, that can add another flavor to our understanding of the fourth house. The fifth house is the house where we see Leo as the underlying energy and the divine, radiant, and shining self. And the planet that loves to be there is the sun. So if you happen to have the sun in the fifth house, it's its favorite place to be. And the sun represents fuel, life force. It's the seasonal time of the year when you're born. And the modality is self-interest and the element is fire. So just quick example, I have the sun in the fifth house, although it's in the sign of Pisces, which is kind of an interesting it's like Pisces doesn't really necessarily want to show up and shine and be visible. And, one of the things that we think about the Leo energy, but it is showing up there. So if it does, so if a Pisces sun decided to show up, they would probably do it in a way that is compassionate, caring, more kind, and more in service to spirit, because Pisces is an in service to spirit sign. Now, traditionally, this house describes how we are intended to learn to love ourselves, how we do self-love, self-approval, self-acceptance, those things, and having self-confidence. That's what is, we would say from shamanic astrology perspective, what that energy of that house would represent. Now, traditionally, this house rules creativity, sexuality, and children. It also has sometimes been seen as lovers, that where you might connect with a lover, or what type of lover you might connect with, and that has nothing to do with who you might marry necessarily. And it also shows you where you may express your artistic talents and the ability to enjoy yourself in life. So it rules over entertainment, holidays, the arts, love affairs, as I just mentioned, gambling and games of chance. And it's considered the house of the heart. And that is the personal heart, the heart where we would do, where we would experience self-love, at least from the shamanic astrology perspective, that's what we would say. So depending on what planets you have in that house, it would have an influence. That would be the underlying influence that is sort of informing those particular planets. Now, the sixth house is the Virgo house, or the energy that is connected to Virgo, which has to do with the sacred work. Vesta is the asteroid that connects to this place, and we haven't used Vesta a lot in the past, but we're starting to understand a little bit more about her, so you may be hearing more about Vesta as we go into the future. And this has to do with sacred function, or we could say sacred work or sacred function, and it is an in service to spirit sign, and the element is earth. So this house describes a person's sacred work, or how they might engage their sacred work. And the sacred work is when a person knows what they're doing is what they were born to do, and they're loving it. Usually it's something that really brings a sense of fulfillment and that sense of purpose of service to spirit. Traditionally, this house also rules health, and it can show where your weaknesses might be. If there's planets transiting through the sixth house like Saturn, you might just be cautious about health issues. Things can come up if you haven't been taking care of yourself. So it's really important to pay attention to that particular aspect. Now, the seventh house, the Libra house, has to do with conscious equal partnership. We look at the asteroid Juno to connect with this particular house, even though we don't really put Juno on the chart. It's still better, it's kind of fills in the space until perhaps a planet or something else comes along. Or maybe we will discover something about Juno that actually lets us know that she really does belong there, because it's all about relationships, and that's the thing that Juno is the most connected to. So conscious equal partnership, relationship, this is a householder, culture bearer modality, and the element is air. So this is the place where we encounter the other. We could say the mysteries of self are the rising sign, and the mysteries of relating to other. Relating to self, rising sign, first house. Mysteries of relating to other, seventh house, how we relate to others. And that's a beloved other as well as anybody else that we might be interacting with. So on a personal level, it can be the mate that you choose, and it describes the intent for relationship. And it also can describe relationships, all relationships, like your work relationships, your business relationships, legal affairs, friends, community. And traditionally, it also covers legal affairs, contracts, and adversaries. So oftentimes, if there's planets transiting through the seventh house, there can be sometimes that will be something that would represent legal issues coming through. So it looks like I need to just create a little space there for that piece. So that's the seventh house. Now we go on to the eighth house. The eighth house is where the energy of Scorpio comes through. This is the shaman sorcerer or sorceress. The planet that is his favorite place to be would be Pluto, and Pluto has to do with transformation. The modality is self-interest, and the element is water. So death and rebirth and regeneration are all ruled by Scorpio and the eighth house. This is the powerful alchemy that is intended to produce potent transformation. So if you have planets in the eighth house, then they're operating through those energies to create transformation. Traditionally referred to as the house of other people's money. So I think that's really interesting. The eighth house rules legacies, inheritances, other people's resources that are available to you, as well as psychic abilities, the occult, sex, birth, death, and the afterlife. So you can see that traditional astrology kind of has a way of looking at it that feels a little bit more limited than what we would say in shamanic astrology, which is that this has to do with alchemy and transformation, and may not be an easy path for sure, but it is definitely meant to be empowering and something that will create great transformation and alchemy in a person's life. So the ninth house has to do with the energy of Sagittarius. And of course, Sagittarius is all about the quest for enlightenment, for truth, for meaning. Jupiter is the planet that most loves to show up in the ninth house, is connected to Sagittarius, and it is representative of the fastest path, or the spiritual path, or we could say the kinds of activities that take you to your goals the most quickly are representative of Jupiter. And so the ninth house is, the modality is in service to spirit, and the element is fire. And this house shows where the quest for an expanded sense of self-awareness and truth is intended to occur. So planets that might be there would be an influence that they would also be experiencing. Now, traditionally, this is the house of the collective mind and long-distance travel, ideally expressed as the pilgrimage. So sometimes, say you have a planet transiting through the ninth house, say Jupiter's transiting through the ninth house, that might be a time when an astrologer would tell you you're going to travel overseas. Or, you have other planets that are especially long-term journey, long-term transits from Jupiter is about a year. Saturn will take about 2.5 years to go through a house. So when we have different outer planets, Uranus will take 7 years to go through a house. So it can take a long time for these planets to transit through, and they'll be also activating the energies of that particular house. However, having said all that, it is less important. It is not on the high level of importance as to whatever the initiation cycles are, or other things that might be going on in the chart. But it's just another piece to be aware of, and why knowing what the houses are can be important. Especially where the personal planets are, and the house that it shows up in can give us additional clues as to how that planet is meant to express in the current life. So traditionally, I already said that, so that this house also rules higher education, publishing, philosophy, and ways to expand consciousness, or the spiritual quest, the spiritual practices that a person might be guided to. And so it's interesting, often, it is interesting to note that sometimes when there's a major planet transit like Jupiter or Saturn going through the ninth house, that a person may choose to do some kind of higher education at that particular time. So just some things to note and to keep in mind when you're looking at what's going on with the houses. Now, the 10th house, Capricorn, is the sign energy that is influencing the 10th house. This has to do with the elder, the wise one, the one who knows. It also has to do with where we make a contribution in the world. Saturn has to do with the law, the structure, the form, and it is a householder culture bearer modality, as well as an earth element. So the mysteries of right livelihood are often associated with the 10th house. Although even though the midheaven may be in another house, but the right livelihood issues can still be connected to the 10th house, and where we make our public contribution usually through our work. Traditionally, this is the house of profession and public standing. So, how you are seen publicly, how you are seen out in the world, or how you're intended to be seen in the world, or what's the energy, how are you learning, what mysteries are you incorporating into your way of being seen in the world. So it describes your status in the community or your reputation, and is referred to as the house of ambition, aspiration, and attainment, and also where you are intended to take responsibility and outwardly express your talents. The 10th house, now if the midheaven is in the 10th house, that really amplifies and energizes this particular intention of the 10th house. If it happens to be in a different house, then there's more that needs to be incorporated, and that's a whole other story we'll cover at another time. All right, so the 11th house is the Aquarius house, and that is the energy that has to do with revolutionary, being different than everybody else, or, exploring new ideas and expanding consciousness and awareness. Uranus, who is the change agent, is the planet that would be happiest in the 11th house and most connected to that particular house. It is in the modality of self-interest and the element of air. So this house really describes how we see the cosmic overview, the big picture, and the divine plan. But traditionally, it is seen as the house of friends, hopes, and wishes, and it has to do with new visions and long-term dreams and goals. It also rules groups and organizations, clubs, and political associations, and it is known as the house of idealism. And Aquarius actually is an energy that has to do with what is ideal, and tends to see things from the perspective of love and light, and would prefer to be able to see all things from that perspective. So the 12th house has to do with Pisces and how to help and heal, how to be of service. Its planet is Neptune, and that's a visionary planet. It's also about dreaming and how we tune into the dreaming energy to bring in to bring our visions into form. It is in service to spirit, and is its modality, and its element is water. So we could say this is the field of all possibilities, where new visions and new dreams can be brought forth. And from the Shamanic Astrology perspective, it's the collective soul and the place of spiritual service to all life. And it is the most mystical of all the houses, and encompasses all the possibilities from all the previous houses. That's actually one of the things that would be seen more from a traditional perspective. It's now, interestingly, and what I feel about this house is that when the sun rises, it actually rises and goes into the 12th house. When the planets are rising and setting east to west, and when you see the chart, the first house cusp is where the ascendant is, the rising sign, and then the sun rises, or any planet rises up into the 12th house. So I don't really know if I completely agree with this traditional perspective, but it is seen as the house of secrets, sorrows, and self-undoing. Doesn't sound very much like very much fun. It also has to do with accidents and trouble, self-defeat, unseen forces, secret enemies, escapism, asylums, hospitals, and prisons. This is like a heavy house. It feels like that perspective of the 12th house is pretty heavy. It's also been called the house of karma, where we reap spiritual rewards or punishment for the deeds we commit. So if planets are transiting through that particular house, then it can maybe give you some particular insights into what's going on. Now, we might not look at it so much as the house of karma, but I don't know. It's something for you to know about and to work with, and to perhaps contemplate. And maybe you can, through your own practice and through what you see and observe, get a sense of really how this house works and how it works for the people around you. So that really covers the 12 houses. Now, here is a blank chart, and you've got a blank chart that you can download and work with. And it represents the different houses. So here you see the first house, second house, third house, fourth house, fifth, and it goes all the way around. And it's really good to start getting familiar with where the houses are located on the chart. And I know we've done this exercise, which I'm going to show you before, but if you didn't get a chance to do it or haven't done it yet, I would recommend maybe doing it now as a way to get more familiar with the houses, and to really start getting a grounded sense of what the houses are for you. So now this is basically everything we just went through, only it's not telling you which house it's connected to, but the sun connects with Leo. It's a fire element. It's self-interest. The moon is Cancer. The element is water, and it's a householder or a culture bearer modality. Mercury is the planet that connects. Well, it's most resonant with Gemini, the element of air, and in service to spirit. So what you can do is you can fill in your chart. So the first house, actually, I think I thought I had another. Nope, I guess not. So, so you can go back through looking at the handout that you've been given, or you can just try to figure it out without looking at the handout and fill these in and see how well you can remember what they are. So starting out with the first house, and you'll start to notice the pattern of how they go around the chart. So first we have fire, earth, air, and water. We have householder or culture bearer, self-interest, and in service to spirit. And then it goes householder, self-interest, and service to spirit. So they just repeat themselves around, as do the elements repeat themselves around the chart. So taking a little bit of time to fill this out and to start, and again, as I mentioned before, ISS means in service to spirit. It's the short form, HH, householder, or if you want to use culture bearer, CB for culture bearer. SI is self-interest. Is a short form if it's easier for you to do that. Or you can just write out the whole thing. And again, you can come back and look at this particular chart, or you can look at the handout that has all of the information as we went through each of the houses, that which planet, which sign, which modality, and which element is connected to each house. And so I do hope that you will take the time to practice that, as if you are not familiar with those and how they connect with the houses. It's going to be really helpful for you as we continue through the course material. Okay, so now we've covered each of the modalities, the householder or culture bearer modality, and we can see on this table how Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, and Libra all fall into the householder modality. And we can see the self-interest signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, all falling into the self-interest modality. And we're seeing the in-service to spirit signs, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Gemini, all falling into the in-service to spirit modality. Now, what this is also showing us is what element is associated with these signs. And when we understand the elements, understanding the signs through their elements, and there's certain energy that's given to each archetypal sign based on its element, and there's certain energy that's given to each archetypal sign based on its modality, we are starting to see the layers and how things work together, and what signs are related by element and by modality. So for example, the earth signs, and remember earth and water are feminine and fire and air are masculine. So the earth signs are Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. The fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and the air signs are Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. So each modality carries each sign carries one of the elements, as well as each element doesn't necessarily carry. Well, yeah, each element actually carries all three of the modalities, so they work together. There's like this interesting way that we can have a deeper understanding of each of the archetypes by knowing their element and knowing their modality. Also, this information is going to really help you when we start to look at aspects. And that's something that we'll talk about in another class, but knowing the modality can help you know if something is square or opposite, because we've seen in each modality how they create a grand cross, and a grand cross creates a grand square, and I'll show more about that when we get to the aspect class. But learning your modalities will be really, really helpful, and of course knowing your elements is also very helpful for lots of reasons that we've already talked about. Now, what I'm showing you here is a blank chart, and I want you to take a blank chart that you've gotten with this class and begin to figure out how each of these houses within the chart, because later we're going to learn how to draw up our own chart and what everything means on the chart, and it won't necessarily have Aries on the first house cusp, because if you are, say, Scorpio rising, you would have Scorpio here on the first house cusp. But each house, and in Shamanic Astrology, we look at each house as carrying the energy of the signs as they relate to the seasonal cycle. So the first house carries the energy of Aries, and that has to do with fire, and that has to do with householder modality as well. And the second house carries the energy of Taurus. That has to do with earth, and that's the energy of the self-interest signs. And Gemini is a air sign, and it's the modality of the service to spirit, and it goes around the chart that way. So I'm going to encourage everybody to fill in the blank chart as a way to get more familiar with the energy that each of these houses carry. And when we get to the class on houses, that's going to really help you to begin to understand a little bit more about how this works, and when we get, when we're going to be drawing up our charts, and just sort of the underlying energy of each house, and getting familiar also with the pattern. So you can fill the first house in. Aries is actually the planet that's most connected to it is Mars. We've covered that in an earlier class. The element is fire, something we also covered in an earlier class. And the energy of the modality is householder or culture bearer. So you can use either one, sign in with whichever one feels most comfortable with you, just so that you're getting familiar with the modality. And then in the second house, you would write in Taurus, and that the planet that's most connected to the second house is Venus, and connected to Taurus, its most resonant energy. And then the earth is the element, and you can use the colors of the elements to represent the element, or you can write in the element, and then the modality is self-interest. So you can begin going around the chart so until you get them all filled in. So you can see here that you have all of them, and you can use, I've used sometimes the abbreviation. So for in service to spirit, you can use ISS, and for householder, you can use HH. If you're using culture bearer, you could use CB. And then for self-interest, you can use SI for self-interest. And you'll want to get to the place where you have them all filled in, and so you can see the pattern, so you can see how they work and start to get more familiar with these. Now, this is another, you can pause this recording too to take the time to fill that in and kind of look at it, if that works for you. Now, the modality, the sign of the modality, or the modality of the sign, and the element of the sign, this is just another little chart that you can work with and you can have printed out if that helps you. So Aries is a householder modality. It's in the element of fire, and it's as we just covered, and this can help you fill out the blank chart above that you can print out. And you can print out as many as you want and work with this as much as you want, but it's a great way to learn and to just become really familiar. I happen to be a very tactile person, so being able to do that really helped me to just ground it in my body in a different way. Even though I had already memorized all of this and already kind of knew it, it was like something different to actually walk through the steps of doing it. Now, this is a chart that's showing the planet. So we have the sun and the sign that it most resonates with. So very similar to what we did in the element class is Leo, and the element of the sign is fire, and the modality of the sign is self-interest. So so what we're looking at is the planet, the sign it most resonates with, the element of the sign that it's resonating with, and the modality of the sign that it's resonating with. Because actually the sun can be in any sign. It could be in Scorpio or Sagittarius or Capricorn. The moon can be in any sign. It can be in Aries or Taurus or Gemini, as can all of these planets be in any specific sign. But what we're seeing here on this chart is the planet that is most resonant, that most is similar to the planetary energy. And so that's just to give you another sense of how to work with this and to start to become more familiar with it, just to have this chart, because we're going to fill out, pretty soon we're going to figure out how to discover what is the strength of the modalities that we have. So here's another chart, and basically it's going through the planets, and it's showing how we're going to weight the energy based on, similar to what we did for the elements. So the personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, are going to get more points for the modality that they're in. And they're also, Jupiter will get 2 points because it's not really a personal planet, but it actually gives a little more energy than, say, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. So very similar to what we did with the elements class. Now, the modality of the sign that's connected to the planet, if you feel like it, if you would like to, you can add another point. So say if you had the sun in Leo, a self-interest, you'd give 4 points for self-interest, and then you could add a point for the fact that the sun is in Leo. Now, if you had the sun in Sagittarius, you'd give 4 points for the in service to spirit modality, but no extra points because it's not in the same, it's not in the sign that's resonating with it most. So just so you have a sense of that, it's slightly different than what we did with the elements, but the idea is to get familiar with how to look at this so that you can look at a chart and sort of quickly get an idea of what the leading modality might be for a person, or if they're balanced in their modalities. All right, so here again, this is my chart we used in the element class. So we're going to use this chart again and filling out what is the strength of the modality that you have. So what you want to do is to go through and put in whatever your sun sign is. Mine happens to be Pisces. Whatever your moon sign is, mine happens to be Sagittarius. Whatever Mercury is in, Aquarius for me, Venus is in Aries, Mars is in Capricorn, Jupiter in Leo, Saturn in Sagittarius, Uranus in Cancer, Neptune in Scorpio, Pluto in Leo. So when we know what that is, and if you then have the chart that says how many points to give, and also so you can find what the modality of each of the signs are, then you'll be able to, and actually I think that's this chart here, because then you can find it really quickly what the modality is, and then you'll want to come back and fill your own out. Now, so for example, here's my sun in Pisces, so I'm going to give myself 4 points in service to spirit. And my moon on my chart, here's my moon in Sagittarius, and I'm going to give myself another 4 points for in service to spirit. And here's Mercury in Aquarius, and so I'll give 4 points to self-interest because Aquarius is in self-interest. And Venus in Aries, Aries is a householder sign, so we give 4 points to householder. I have Mars in Capricorn giving 4 points to householder again. And I have Jupiter in Leo, so I'm going to give myself 2 points for self-interest. And Saturn is in Sagittarius, so 1 point for service to spirit. Uranus is in Cancer, so 1 point for householder, because Cancer is a householder sign. Neptune is in Scorpio, and that's another self-interest sign, 1 point for that. Pluto is in Leo, and 1 point for that. And if you add everything up, there are 9 points of householder, 8 points of self-interest, and 9 points of service to spirit. Now, actually, if we look at the personal planets from Mars up, we actually have the greatest strength in householder and service to spirit with only 4 points in self-interest. Now, that's interesting, and we'll learn a little bit more about this because I am Scorpio rising. And so part of what I'm learning about is how to have self-interest. And as with a Pisces sun and a Sagittarius moon, that has not been an easy journey for me. So here you have your own blank chart. You're going to want to fill in what sign the sun is in. So if you have the sun in Capricorn or in Gemini or whatever, you're going to put that in here. And then you're going to figure out, so say the sun is in Capricorn, that would be householder. You'd give yourself 4 points here. If you had the sun in Gemini, it would be service to spirit, so you'd put 4 points here. If you had the sun in Taurus, you'd put 4 points in the self-interest sign. And then you can, so you fill in this part, and then you fill in, based on the previous table, how many points go into each column, and then you can figure out what is the strength of your householder in service to spirit and self-interest, or culture bearer, I should say, instead of householder, trying to retrain my brain here on including the culture bearer aspect of that. So, and then once you know what the strength of the modalities are, that can give you a little bit of a sense, based on everything we've covered so far, of where you may be in balance, out of balance, and what are some of the things you can maybe come up with some ideas of some things you can do to help bring that into balance. Or you can also check out the course that goes more deeply into this and how you can balance these not elements. There's also one that helps you to balance the elements and understand them more deeply, but to do the one that's on the modalities, that will spend at least an hour and a half on each modality. And that will take a much deeper dive into all this, because we haven't had that much time to look at each of these so far. But in any case, what you can do is also look at some additional resources that we have. So if you don't have your own natal chart, or you want to find out about other people, you can get free charts at alab.com and go to /free chart, or just click on this link. Well, actually, I guess you can't click on the link in the audio, but it'll be in the handout. And then the Shamanic Astrology Handbook is also a great resource. The 12 Tribes CD is a guided journey through the archetypes of the signs, just to give you a more embodied experience of all of that. And then we now have the Shamanic Astrology Divination card deck. And there's also additional teleclasses on the Shamanic Astrology website that can help deepen your experience of these mysteries.